it needs to be understood among the gaming community is that like Nintendo cannot compete in the hardware space. I have put porn on your Nintendo Switch.
Hello guys, and welcome to the video that I said I was going to do right after the Quantum TV demonetized video. So, as luck would have it, Harman Smith, local Nintendo drone fanboy, is still salty that Pokemon Gen 9 is getting a lot of scorn, and rightfully so if you ask me, and he just can't handle Nintendo or their products getting even the slightest bit of criticism. Not too much more to say, really, so let's get into it.
Hello everyone, this is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I the Dragon, Cool and Beautiful Rabbit Hole Lore and Fray, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon.
Sorry that I left that in there, folks, but I have to ask Harmon, why in God's name do you say that at the start of every single video of yours, Harmon? Seriously, first of all, nobody cares about your little fan fiction, and trust me when I say that it's bad, because I have actually read it, and by read it, I mean read the free PDF bits Amazon provides, and when I say that it's bad, I mean it's bad. Seriously, I wanted to claw my eyeballs out by the time that I got through reading it. Secondly, when you say your real name Harmon, you were doxing yourself, and that's even worse than your fan fiction. Okay, now that I've gotten that off my chest, I'll let Harmon resume. Carry on, Harmon.
So, now that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has been out for a couple of weeks, and we can all kind of admit that, like, the backlash, the YouTuber conspiracies, the nonsense, like, all the weird things that were happening before release, we can all acknowledge that it didn't really impact the game's success at all.
Well, of course all of that stuff you mentioned didn't affect Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's success at all, Harmon. It's Pokemon. It's guaranteed to sell well, my guy. It's been doing the same old stuff since we were kids, and nostalgia is one heck of a powerful drug, and Nintendo is excellent at playing off of their fans' nostalgia. Seriously, Pokemon Gen 9 is when the series went open world, but either it or Gen 8 is when Game Freak started showing their true colors, and they're turning into EA. For those of you who don't believe me, watch the videos made by the Actman and Digital Foundry, whom I will link in the description below, to see just how far Pokemon has sunk, and I say this as a huge Pokemon fan.
This is still a highly successful Pokemon game. I'm sure it sold more than Sword and Shield already. It's going to go on to be one of the best-selling games in the franchise. It's going to be, like, really well-remembered and beloved.
No, it won't.
I myself really love this game. I'm curious if anyone else is kind of thinking the same thing I am, in that this is, I think, a mark of just how little influence the gaming industry has over the narrative. Namely, like, how much can game journalists, YouTubers, and shills smear Nintendo products? And
excuse me? Harmon, nobody is smearing Nintendo or their products. We're smearing Game Freak and their games because ever since Pokemon Sword and Shield, Game Freak has been taking the crud and removing stuff from the Pokemon games, such as well-beloved features, for literally no reason other than they can. I mean, look at how well-received Pokemon Legends Arceus was. That game was made by Game Freak, and while it didn't have every single Pokemon in the game, it didn't need them all because there was no reason to trade, other than for Pokemon who can only evolve by trading, and I don't even think any of those Pokemon were in the game. Having said that, it's been a while since I last played Pokemon Legends Arceus, so I really don't remember. I still need to go back and beat that game. Anyways, Harmon, the point is, Pokemon is the largest grossing media franchise on the planet. Game Freak has more than enough money to hire whoever they want to make these games. They're just being greedy and cutting corners like so many other AAA game studios nowadays.
And essentially, what I've come to realize over the past couple of years is that, like, no matter how hard they try to downplay stuff like ARMS, stuff like Octopath Traveler, stuff like Splatoon, stuff like Pokemon, like, it's always going to come back to the same thing. And that, like, these games, being legitimately well-made, interesting, unique titles, are going to get a genuine fan base, in spite of the weird backlash and the conspiracies.
Pokemon Gen 9's backlash is because it was shoddily put together and just not a good game. I couldn't care less about ARMS if I tried, and I've heard nothing but praise for Octopath Traveler.
So no matter what these people do, no matter how badly the game sells, or how much they rag on it, or, like, make up weird conspiracies about it, like, there's going to be someone out there who likes it. And 5 to 10 years later, that person is going to have introduced that game to dozens of other people, right? Like, I myself have done this with stuff like the Wonderful 101 and Bayonetta, right? I have been on the front lines talking about like some of these niche, obscure Nintendo games over the past several years. And now, I am in the very early stages of building like a real community of people who will actually listen to me talk about things like, say, Codename Steam or, Dragon Quest V.
You keep the good name of Dragon Quest out of your mouth, Harmon.
Or Star Fox Zero or Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. Like, the list really, really goes on and on. Like, I feel like the gaming community at this point is split between like two camps. People who like blindly believe what gaming journalists say, and then people who actually play the games. And the thing is that first camp is losing more and more influence all the time for a wide range of reasons. For one thing, if you're a YouTuber, if you cover action games, nobody's going to go to you to cover like turn-based RPGs, right? If you're Angry Joe, if you've never covered a Nintendo game in your life, if you haven't played Pokemon ever, no one's going to go to you to talk about like the problems with the newest Pokemon game. If you're the Act Man and you're pretending that Elden Ring is like one of the best things ever made or something, and you try going after Pokemon, it's not going to work. Like, the Pokemon community is going to be following Pokemon YouTube.
Okay, first of all, Harmon, one of those games you mentioned, specifically Dragon Quest V, is not a Nintendo game. It is a Square Enix game. Square Enix doesn't belong to any single game company. Why do you think their games are on all three video game consoles plus PC? Secondly, everyone I have ever heard talking about Star Fox Zero has said that the game is bad, kinda like your literature, Harmon. And your community is going to be very small, by the way. Also, Dragon Quest isn't niche, Harmon. It's had games sell well over 1 million units. I wouldn't exactly call that niche. Would you?
And as a result of that, Pokemon YouTubers give a more nuanced opinion on it. They're more willing to talk about like a game's positive aspects as well as the negative. And as a result of that, it kind of, you're going to get a divide between the people who like the game and people who don't like the game. But by its nature, the fact that we're talking about like, the Pokemon community as a whole, the people who like the game are going to be overwhelmingly more engaged with the community and with the game itself than people who allegedly don't like the game. It's that old like thing. It's that old like saying, if you hate the game that much, why are you still playing it?
That's a very good question, Harmon. Now let's reframe it and ask it of you. If you hate the Steam Deck and emulation so much, why do you let them live rent-free in your head? Furthermore, Harmon, and I know we've had this conversation before, but if someone truly cares about the Pokemon games, then they will criticize them, as they want these games to be the best that they possibly can be. If Game Freak is going to stoop so low that they'll actually cut corners to make these games, then they need to thump up enough money to hire another company to do it, and don't tell me Game Freak doesn't have the money to do that. Pokemon is the highest grossing media franchise on Earth. They have more than enough money to hire whoever they want to make these games.
And that's the reality we're kind of in, like in Pokemon, because for the past couple of generations, or in fact, I would argue since Gen 1, we've had these endless wave of people trying to tell us that Pokemon is dead, it's irrelevant, it was never good to begin with, it's time to grow up and play another franchise. But in reality, Pokemon is, and always has been, a top-tier JRPG. It's huge for a reason. It's not only like appealing to the masses, it also has like a very real hardcore following behind it for a reason. This is one of the best video game franchises ever made.
I can promise you right now, Harmon, no one outside of Japan since Gen 1 has been saying that Pokemon is dead. They started saying that after Gen 2, considering that the entire game was basically the first game with a different coat of paint. All they did was allow you to explore a new region with the same story as the last Pokemon game, and it was Gen 3 was coming out, if I recall correctly, that Junichi Mitsuda developed stomach ulcers and said, "Oh shit, I gotta tell the boys back at Game Freak HQ that people ain't buying our shit anymore." He may not have said it quite like that, but he was determined to prove that Pokemon is still going to be as fun as it ever was with Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, and whatever he did, it worked. Because Pokemon is still selling like hotcakes, and don't kid yourself, Harmon. The only reason Pokemon Scarlet and Violet sold as well as they did was because they have Pokemon in the title.
And I'm very, very tired of people not acknowledging it. It's weird to see just the kind of the links people will go to try and denounce these games and dismiss them like, oh, they're on handhelds. They're not relevant enough to compete with the real games.
Who exactly is saying these things, Harmon?
You still haven't told me! When in reality, they're bigger than essentially everything other than like Call of Duty, honestly. And that's just like the retail releases. When it comes to like merchandising, when it comes to like the spin-off materials, like there's nothing bigger than Pokemon. You know, you can argue Grand Theft Auto is bigger because of like, oh, Grand Theft Auto 5 sold 100 million units and people are buying shark cards on GTA Online. Pokemon Go alone probably generates more than GTA Online, okay? Like, if it doesn't, it's close. You know, Pokemon has, like, real merchandising potential. It has, like, real potential for storyline. It's a unique IP that is universally appealing to everyone.
Harmon, the only reason Pokemon sells anything at all nowadays is purely because it has the word Pokemon in its title. If you take that word out, I promise you the Pokemon games wouldn't sell nearly as well as they do. And this is coming from a huge Pokemon fan, by the way. That goes for the merchandise too. While the character designs for the Pokemon are awesome, it's still name recognition that allows all the Pokemon merch to sell as well as it does.
You know what I mean? Like, its value, its strength as a brand, it cannot be denied. And yet, we're constantly seeing these people come out and try their hardest to downplay it. And because they know Pokemon has become a very real threat to the PlayStation world order, to like the third-party party, to the
I swear to God, folks, Harmon is going to drive me to drinking. I'm honestly thinking of just going out and buying some booze to make the pains of the nonsense he's babbling about go away. First of all, Pokemon is not a threat to any game company outside of those who make monster-catching RPGs, and there are more of them than you might think. And trust me when I say this, Harmon, but Pokemon isn't even a threat to other monster-catching RPGs, because ever since Gen 3, the Pokemon games have been basically the same exact game since Red, Blue, Yellow, but with a different coat of paint. Even Dragon Quest does more to make each game feel unique. Also, Dragon Quest is a really good, if bare-bones basic, JRPG series. You definitely should check it out if ever you get the chance.
The gaming establishment, essentially. Because anything that props up Nintendo this much is a major threat. And of course, you're kind of seeing this again with like all the nonstop attack articles on the Switch and the hardware and like upcoming games, like all the weird damage control articles about Tears of the Kingdom and how that's going to like, oh, it couldn't possibly compete with Elden Ring. Like you're seeing all this stuff and it's just not going to stick. That's the reality we're in.
Tears of the Kingdom won't be able to compete with Elden Ring at all, Harmon, because A, Tears of the Kingdom is an action-adventure game, whereas Elden Ring is an action RPG. Two very different genres that can definitely be compared, but the problem you face, Harmon, is that the Switch is very underpowered compared to what is required to run Elden Ring, and B, I forgot what the second point I was going to raise was. Also, what are these attack articles that you're talking about, Harmon? I looked online, and all I saw were people saying that Tears of the Kingdom needs to redefine open world games, or that it was pushed back a bit so as not to compete with Elden Ring for GOTY.
In that, like, there are so many game journalists spouting, like, absolute nonsense all the time.
Excellent, so then you would get along with them very well. You'll be fast friends with those game journalists then, Harmon, because you spread absolute nonsense all the flippin' time.
The more divisive opinions, it's difficult for the mainstream agenda to really take hold anymore, right? Like, it's weird to me to see people, like, pretend to be excited for, like, the PS5 or Xbox One, because there hasn't been anything relevant for those games ever, honestly. Like, it's weird to see people pretend to get excited over, like, Star Ocean or like, any of these other fringe IPs that haven't been good ever.
Excuse me, Harmon? Okay, first things first. PlayStation and Xbox are platforms, Harmon, not games. I know you're stupid, but come on, man. I'm a fucking moron, and even I knew that. Secondly, Star Ocean is a good IP, Harmon. We're on, what, I think the 6th Star Ocean game now? If they weren't good ever, as you claim, then they wouldn't have made any more of them past the first one, now would they? Also, PlayStation and Xbox have far more relevant things coming to them than the Nintendo Switch does. Case in point, even though it's already been released, Elden Ring. I don't recall seeing or hearing about a Switch port of Elden Ring, Harmon. Have you?
You know, like, it's weird to see, like, everyone just do everything they possibly can to hype up every single minor product they possibly could in order to just keep up the illusion for just a little bit longer that Nintendo can't compete with the third parties. They really, really are desperate to keep up this narrative.
Nintendo is trying to attract the third parties, Harmon, not compete with them. The third parties are what keep Nintendo and their products afloat, same as any other game console manufacturer.
And it's not going to work. It hasn't worked. It's been a narrative that's been in decline since like the Wii days, I would say, or maybe even ever since the GameCube, or maybe it never really took off to begin with. Like, the thing is, it never bothered the actual fans. The people who were convinced of that Nintendo was for kids are people who never played a Nintendo console, who never picked up a controller. It's weird seeing people today try to pretend that like the N64 controller was like weird, that there was something unintuitive about it. There was nothing strange about that thing, nothing. If you spent like 5 minutes with it, you would have figured it out immediately.
Harmon, the N64 controller was pretty weird, especially when you factor in that the PS1 came out before it and had a much better controller than the N64 did. Seriously, what was Nintendo thinking with that thing? I mean, I got my Nintendo 64 for Christmas when I was 5 years old, and even still, the Nintendo 64 controller feels so weird to me.
It's absurd seeing the lengths that these people will go to continue justifying their nonsense. So
I wouldn't be talking about other people trying to justify their nonsense, Harmon, especially when you can't seem to practice what you preach, bro.
What can we expect to see in the future? I think we're going to see like more and more ridiculous nonsense.
Harmon confirmed to be spreading ridiculous nonsense in 2023. You heard it here first, folks.
And more, we're seeing situations like that. Like, the Pretendos are walking right into these situations. Oh, they haven't released Tears of the Kingdom news in a while. Is the game in trouble? No. The game looks great. Oh, but it can't compete with Elden Ring. It's going to outsell Elden Ring quite handedly, I would say.
Unless Tears of the Kingdom does something to really mix up the Zelda formula the way Breath of the Wild did, Harmon, it will not outsell Elden Ring. I can tell you that for free right here and now. Trust me, Harmon.
Oh, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it's broken. I picked up the game like 3 weeks after launch. Never had a glitch. Never.
I can tell you all with 100% certainty that is a complete lie. There were several bugs and glitches in Harmon's Pokemon Scarlet stream, some of which even he noticed. But I'll just go ahead and link you to the Absol's video of Harmon Smith not noticing bugs and glitches in Pokemon Scarlet for 5 minutes straight. It's just, dude, how blind do you have to be to not notice the bugs in that video in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? I'm a moron, and even I noticed a lot of the bugs and glitches in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet.
And I've had people tell me there were glitches happening all the time on screen. Never saw them. Never. There was nothing wrong with Scarlet and Violet.
Yes, there was, Harmon! Some of those bugs and glitches you even noticed! Dude, oh my god, this guy has bigger selective memory than freaking Darkside Phil. I swear to God.
These guys have reached the point where they're straight up making things up in order to justify their nonsense. Other than like the mythical glitches and bugs actually there are bugs in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Bug type Pokemon, excuse me. Is that what you're talking about? There are too many bugs?
Harmon, you know good and well what bugs we were talking about, you brain dead. Oh my god. Folks, oh lord, I can't do it. At this point, I don't feel like working on this video anymore. And besides, we're at the end anyways. After that joke, it's just, I'm done. I'm sleepy. I want to go to bed. And, oh man, I'll see you all in the next Harmon Smith video, which is just right around the corner, I promise you, this time. I'll see you all then. Bye-bye for now.